On February 24th, 2022, Russia shocked the world when it launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and since that day, the world has been asking, why? Why did Russia do this? And in this video, I'm going to attempt to explain why. Why did Russia attack Ukraine? And I've come up with a list of 10 reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine. And before we start this list, I just want to state outright that the propaganda that the Kremlin puts out, in my opinion, is pretty lazy and doesn't make any sense. Their stated objective for toppling the government in Kyiv is they need to denazify it. However, the democratically elected president of Ukraine is Jewish. His grandparents fought the Nazis in World War II. He lost family members in the Holocaust. To call him a Nazi, and they needed to launch a full-scale invasion to basically arrest or assassinate him. This just doesn't make any sense. However, who currently is acting like a fascist dictator, invading their neighbors, suppressing civil liberties at home, bombing schools, bombing hospitals, bombing churches? The Russian people need to look really hard at their current leader and say, who does he most resemble from their past? Okay, let's now start the list of 10 reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine. And the first one, like many wars, is a war over limited resources. And Russia specifically wants control of Ukraine's oil and gas reserves. Now, Ukraine is actually a very large country, blessed with a good geography. However, it has, up until this point, remained mostly undeveloped. It's not been developed, so it has untapped potential. Excluding Russia's gas reserves in Asia, Ukraine today holds the second biggest known gas reserves in Europe. As of late 2019, known Ukrainian reserves amounted to 1.09 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. Second only to Norway's known resources of 1.53. However, these enormous reserves of natural gas remain largely untapped. And this is why Russia has been so focused on Crimea and the eastern part of Donbass. Ukraine's natural gas resources are located in the west under Lviv, in the east near Donbass, and in the south off the coast of Crimea. And for the short term, Russia just wants to stop Ukraine from tapping these resources until they can get control of this land, and then at some point in the future, they will tap these to profit and benefit themselves. Reason number 2 for this war is to stop Ukraine from joining the EU and NATO, and Russian propaganda states that NATO is an adversarial coalition that is determined to attack Russia someday. This makes no sense. Why would NATO voluntarily attack a country that has 6,000 deployable nuclear warheads? And if NATO was to ever attack Russia, why wouldn't it do it today? It has every excuse, every justification to start bombing Russia in Ukraine's defense, and even today, it won't do it. All of these Eastern European countries suffered under Moscow's rule for 50 or 60 years, and they voluntarily joined NATO. They wanted to join the EU. So countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, nobody forced them to join NATO. They voluntarily did it. And they did it for Article 5 collective defense. They knew that at some point in the future, Moscow and Russia was going to start talking about empire and their glory days and how these countries once belonged to Russia. And they knew that at some point in the future, Russia was going to attack them. Russia was going to invade them just like Russia is doing to Ukraine right now, which is why all of these countries chose to join NATO. So by Russia attacking Ukraine today, they're doing it preemptively, because if Ukraine successfully did join NATO, that would complicate things. Russia would then be hesitant to attack a NATO-allied country, once again being cautious of this Article 5 collective defense pact. Reason number 3 is that Russia wants a land bridge connection to Crimea, when they stole Crimea from Ukraine in 2014, they did this mostly because there's an important naval base at Sevastopol here in the southwest, and Crimea doesn't touch mainland Russia. So to resupply and connect Crimea to the mainland, they had to construct a bridge. Militarily and strategically, this is a weak point for Crimea. So Russia wants to connect Crimea by land through these towns like Berdyansk and Mariupol. So Russian forces have been concentrating their efforts the most here in an attempt to control this coastline and control this territory so they can easily build railways and roads to connect Crimea to mainland Russia. Reason number 4 is that Russia wants to control the water supply to Crimea, and what's happened here is that the Dnieper River runs through the center of Ukraine, and it actually flows out over here. However, decades ago, the Soviets built this North Crimea Canal in order to divert fresh water through Ukraine out to the Crimea Peninsula. And in 2014, when Russia illegally seized this land, the Ukrainians shut off this canal. They stopped diverting fresh water for the use of the people of Crimea. The logic being, if Russia illegally stole this land from us, why would we continue giving them free water? Normally, this land out here on Crimea, it's basically salt water and marsh flats. And for the people to continue their agriculture or just have water to drink and live on, Russia has been spending billions of dollars a year pumping fresh water across this bridge through pipes. This was very costly, and Crimea has been rationing water ever since Russia took this land in 2014. So this is why Russian forces immediately had to push to the Dnieper River, and one of the first things they did was continue the flow of fresh water through this canal to the citizens of Crimea. Reason number 5 is that Russia wants complete control of the Sea of Azov. Most people familiar with European geography knows that this is the Black Sea over here, but the Sea of Azov is basically a sea within a sea. So all of this is the Black Sea, and then almost entirely contained in the northeast, there's the Sea of Azov. And Russia has always controlled the east coast of this sea. In 2014, they took control of Crimea. However, Ukraine still controls this coastline along with cities of Berdyansk and Mariupol. Potentially, this is why Russia is being so brutal on Mariupol. It's because they want complete control of this coastline, or at the least have this be an independent state that is pro-Russian. The reason why is because one of their most important port cities and shipping destinations is this port city of Rostov-on-Don port, and this is one of Russia's 3 major ports. The other ones being St. Petersburg, and then Murmansk is up here. But back in the Soviet era, the Soviet Union constructed this canal network that's 6,500 kilometers long. It's called the Unified Deepwater System of European Russia. And this canal system connects the Black Sea through the Sea of Azov to the Caspian Sea, to the White Sea and the Arctic Ocean, and then the Gulf of Finland and the Baltic Sea. So for Russia, the strategic importance of this canal system is everything. They can ship or move potentially military equipment from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea through this canal system. So the fact that a potentially hostile country is so close to one of their most important port cities, this is the equivalent of, let's say, New Orleans being America's most important port city, and then the Florida coastline was controlled by China or controlled by Russia. This would obviously drive the United States military crazy and cause strategic insecurity. So this is why potentially Russia is being so aggressive to once again gain control of this entire coastline next to one of their most strategic ports. Reason number 6 is going to be complicated, but it involves religious control over Ukraine. Now, I personally am not Eastern Orthodox Christian. However, over 250 million people in the world do identify as Eastern Orthodox Christian. And there was a very important event in their church called the 2018 Moscow-Constantinople Schism. I don't have all the information or all the details of this event, but I'm going to simplify it for you, basically how I understand it. And in the Eastern Orthodox Church, there is a collection of different churches led by their own patriarchs. So there's the Church of Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, Russia, Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria. And basically, they're all supposed to be treated as equals, basically in this system of bishops or system of cardinals. And the Church of Russia, established in 1589, had been in control of Ukraine up until recently. So for almost 500 years, the Patriarch of Moscow was in charge of the Eastern Orthodox members inside of Ukraine. The current Patriarch of Moscow is this man right here, Patriarch Kirill. And after Russia seized Crimea in 2014, Eastern Orthodox members in Ukraine wanted to form their own church separate from the Patriarch of Moscow. And to do this, there's only one way. You have to go to the Patriarch of Constantinople. He's basically first among equals of this collection of patriarchs. He's not quite like the Pope. He's not in charge of the other ones, but he's the only one that can recognize basically a new church and allow it to form. So the Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew I, he recognized this man, the Patriarch Philaret of Kiev, and Ukraine was allowed to form their own separate Eastern Orthodox Church from the Patriarch of Moscow. And what does this do for Ukraine? It strengthens Ukrainian identity, being once again separate from Russia. Here's President Zelensky meeting with the Patriarch of Kiev. And how do you think Putin took this news? Putin condemns creation of independent Ukrainian church. Putin slammed the decision as a blatant breach of religious freedoms. Allowing people to form their own church separate from Russia was a breach of religious freedoms. So here's the Patriarch of Constantinople with the Patriarch of Moscow. In response to the Patriarch of Constantinople recognizing Ukraine as separate, the Patriarch of Moscow is very unhappy, and he's basically no longer recognizing the authority, what he had, for the Patriarch of Constantinople. So these two are unhappy with each other. These two are fighting. And how much can you trust this Patriarch of Moscow, Patriarch Kirill? I honestly don't know anything about the guy, but he's obviously very close with Putin, and anybody close to Putin, I personally don't trust. And it was Vladimir Lenin who said the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves, which makes me suspect that this Patriarch of Moscow is basically under Putin's thumb. It should be the religious leaders of Russia right now leading the opposition, saying it's wrong to bomb hospitals, it's wrong to bomb schools, it's wrong to bomb churches in Ukraine. But I'm guessing this guy is keeping his mouth shut. He wants to stay in power, and these two probably have a very symbiotic relationship in Russia. But what I'm guessing is that if Russia successfully takes control of Ukraine, then both the president of Ukraine and the Patriarch of Kiev will probably be arrested and taken back to Moscow to stand trial as being Nazis. Reason number 7 is a stupid one, but it is actually the 100-year anniversary of the creation of the Soviet Union this year. And authoritarians, fascist dictators, they love having military parades for some reason, and they're very particular or superstitious about certain dates or certain anniversaries. And Putin was planning on having 2 very large military parades this year, I'm sure. The first one being May 9th. This is the anniversary. They celebrate the Great Patriotic War, World War II, known to us in the West. And Russia was hoping to attack Ukraine, topple the government in February. Maybe the war takes a week. That then gives them 2 months to plan a big celebration, a big victory parade, as Ukraine is brought back into the Russian Empire. Additionally, on December 30th of 1922, this is when the Soviet Union was officially created. So I'm sure the reason why Vladimir Putin wanted to attack this year and not last year and not wait until next year is because this is the 100-year anniversary of the creation of the Soviet Union. Vladimir Putin, once again, wants to extend Moscow's power and influence and prestige over their neighbors, and they want to celebrate basically when Moscow was at its most powerful. Reason number 8 is an easy one, and the Russian military wants to test their latest and greatest military technology. They've already admitted to doing this, saying that they've used a hypersonic cruise missile to attack Ukraine. There's honestly no reason that they needed to do this. Ukraine is not that far from Russia. They didn't need to use a hypersonic cruise missile, but they chose to. One, because they wanted to see how does this weapon perform in a real-world operational environment. They want to use their weapons on real buildings, real people, a real military to see how it'll perform potentially for a later conflict with maybe NATO or the United States or China or whoever. So militaries will do this. They will get into conflicts and then use it as an excuse to test their latest and greatest military technology. And that leads us to reason 9 why Russia attacked Ukraine, and they did it in part to impress China and other countries that might potentially buy their military weapons. For the last decade, Russia has actually been trying to build a formal military alliance with China, but China is the one who's been hesitant because Vladimir Putin and Moscow want this to be a somewhat equal relationship. They don't want to be the junior partner in a military alliance. However, President Xi Jinping knows that China is a rising power and Russia is a declining power. China has an economy 10 times larger than Russia, a population 10 times larger than Russia. So Russia partly attacked Ukraine to demonstrate to the Chinese that their military knew what they were doing, that this invasion of Ukraine was going to go smooth, easy peasy, nice and easy, and they could help China achieve some of their military objectives, potentially like taking the island of Taiwan. Additionally, Russia supplies a lot of arms around the world to countries like India, China, Algeria, Egypt, Vietnam, Kazakhstan. They make money selling their weapons around the world. What do they sell? They sell aircraft, tanks, engines, missiles, ships. And this was supposed to be Russia's moment to shine, Russia's ability to demonstrate and show their military in action, dominating this country. And if you want to be like Russia, you can buy their hardware and equipment at your local Russian dealership. However, it's not looking good for Russia. The performance of their aircraft, the performance of their vehicles, the performance of their missiles, I don't think this improved Russia's ability to sell their weapons around the world. Reason number 10 might be the most disturbing, but I'm convinced at this point that Russia deliberately went into Ukraine in order to steal a certain portion of their population, to either subjugate or enslave them. And when you think about the history of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Putin is trying to reconstitute it, and the Soviet Union could only survive by basically enslaving tens of millions of their own people in their gulag system, forcing them to labor to death in order for the benefit of the states. And Ukraine is accusing Russia of deliberately taking civilians as hostages, either important people or the family of important people, back to Moscow. But Russia is deliberately creating a humanitarian crisis and then trying to force these refugees to come to Russia. They're basically just kidnapping them with buses at this point in Ukraine, And of course, the Kremlin is lying and saying these people want to relocate to Russia. However, if Russia is the one destroying their schools, destroying their hospitals, killing their neighbors, why would 400,000 people, from cities like Kharkiv or Mariupol willingly want to go to Russia? They're being forcefully taken there. And I think Russia is doing this deliberately because they're insecure about their own population demographics. The country has been experiencing a lot of economic uncertainty, and Russians at home are just having fewer children. They also have a very high mortality rates, and this is creating a full-fledged demographic crisis in Russia. If you didn't know this, Russia's population actually peaked in 1992 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The population in 1992 was 148 million. So there are 4 million less Russians today in Russia than there was 30 years ago. So these Ukrainian refugees being forced into Russia, they're having their passports taken away. They're having their cell phones and their money taken away, and they're being held in these filtration camps. And I think Russia's objective is to put them to work, to force them to take domestic servant jobs or potentially become the wives of Russian men, relocate them to remote areas of Russia where Russians don't want to go to do jobs that Russians don't want to do. And if Russia has already successfully taken almost 500,000 people and brought them back to Russia, those are people who can now work for the benefit of Russia to once again help with their declining population demographics. Okay guys, those are the 10 reasons that I could come up with why Russia invaded Ukraine. Ultimately, I don't think Russia will succeed. Eventually, the economic sanctions will cripple their military as bodies of Russian soldiers go home to the Russian people. Eventually, they will grow tired of this war and put political pressure on the Kremlin, and the Kremlin inevitably will have to retreat from the country. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up so the algorithm knows it's good. I'll include links in the description to most of my references for this video. If you have any comments or questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, take care, be safe.